Hey there, happy Halloween, everybody. We are back to explanations of where our holidays come from. But first, hey, you know what? We're deep into fall. It's soup season, and Kettle and Fire's got you covered. They got all kinds of soups, but then they've got their bone broth, which you can use as a base for your soup or just drink it hot from your coffee cup. I wouldn't put it in there with the coffee, though. Good folks at Kettle and Fire want to give you 10% off, listeners of this podcast. Go to kettleandfire.com, fill up your box, use code BetterHumanhood at checkout. They will give you that 10% off. It's Kettle and Fire, KETTLEANDFIRE.com. Code BetterHumanhood at checkout for 10% off. Let's do the
show. Welcome to Better Humanhood, where we build a better world by building better people. We have to live on the planet, and we have to live with other people. We have conversations about making that a wonderful proposition.
The first time the word Halloween was used in print is from a Robert Burns poem called Halloween. We're going to have a link to it at the show notes, because let's face it, you do not want to hear me butcher this long pile of Scots. You think it's bad when I try to do Auld Lang Syne? Ha! This one's just asking for me to destroy it. So today we're going to talk about Halloween and Day of the Dead. They're kind of interconnected. They happen at the same time. They both generally deal at some level with death. Obviously, Day of the Dead more than Halloween. And if you've missed our series, Intermittent, we've been, just exploring where holidays originated, and it, we're at the time of the year where we're going to do this, and we got Veterans Day coming up. We'll talk about that next week, and we got Thanksgiving coming up. And hey, I thought since my birthday is also coming up that we do an episode on why we celebrate birthdays, so that's coming up as well. But first, Halloween and Day of the Dead. In the U.S. anyway, we have an uncomfortable relationship with death. You might call it out of sight, out of mind. Through dying of natural causes, very few people die in the home anymore. If they do, we shove them out the door as quickly as possible. We get mildly uncomfortable when we hear Doug Stanhope tell a hilarious story about not so much assisting as bar-backing his mother's suicide. When we opt for open casket visitations, usually the individual has been pumped full of preservatives and made up to look living, but really looks more like a creepy silicone doll more often than not. But there are cultures that don't look at death with such fear. One Japanese custom has family members sorting cremated remains with chopsticks. Jewish prayer of mourning, the Kaddish, doesn't mention death at all and is instead something of a plea for peace and blessings in our lives. Brings us to a couple of autumn holidays. Halloween, celebrated each year on October 31st, happens to fall on a Thursday, so you're getting this podcast on Halloween itself. What do you know? And Day of the Dead, more of a Latin holiday at this point, but plenty of communities celebrating it in the U.S. Celebrated from today, the 31st of October, through the 2nd of November every year. Both have roots in the Gaelic and Celtic pagan celebration of Samhain. That millennia-old holiday commemorates the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the darker part of the year. It is considered a liminal time when spirits could cross into the land of the living, and celebrants believed that they had to appease the spirits to ensure that their cattle and land would survive the winter. Dia de los Muertos, or the Day of the Dead, melds Samhain with ancient Aztec and Toltec ceremonies. It's also tied to the Catholic All Saints' Day, which is November 1st, and All Souls' Day, which is November 2nd. Holiday is very much a celebration of the lives of deceased family members, whose photos are placed with candles, flowers, and other offerings on household ofrendas or altars. As with Samhain, it's a liminal time when deceased ancestors can visit the living. And while the jack-o'-lantern is a common symbol of Halloween, more on that later, The skull is the symbol of the Day of the Dead. Revelers paint their faces and parade in bright colors. Printer and cartoonist Jose Guadalupe Posada created the most famous of the Day of the Dead skeletons, La Calavera Catrina, which is a reimagining of the Aztec goddess of the underworld. And I'm not even going to give it a go here. Well, maybe I will. Mictacasihuatl. I'm sure I butchered that. Probably just could have watched a YouTube video that tells me how to say it, but I didn't. And if you want a beautiful, if Disney-fied, family-friendly look at the Day of the Dead, watch Coco. Really enjoyed that movie. Halloween, meanwhile, has roughly the same origins as Day of the Dead, minus the Aztec influence. The night before All Saints' Day was deemed All Hallows' Eve by the Catholic Church sometime around the mid-9th century, so over 1,000 years ago. Scots poet Robert Burns contracted Hallows' Eve to Halloween in a 1785 poem. It's the one we said I'm not going to try to pronounce. Celebrations of spirits around Halloween turned into mischievous gatherings, which turned into modern-day trick-or-treating. The legend of the jack-o'-lantern is an interesting one that I never knew about. It seems as though a town drunk named Jack trapped Satan up a tree and promised he'd let the devil come down if the Prince of Darkness never took his soul. Jack died, as people do, and being a conniving drunkard, he didn't get into heaven, but the devil kept his end of the bargain and wouldn't take Jack's soul. He did give Jack some flame to light his way through the world, and there is your jack-o'-lantern. Also interesting is that the official Jehovah's Witness website uses Bible verses to decry various aspects of Halloween, and rather than just read them, we'll give you a link in the show notes if you're interested. I didn't think they were so convincing. I'll let you decide that. Well, this was a short one. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a happy Halloween, a safe Halloween, and if you are remembering your loved ones, a meaningful Day of the Dead celebration. As always, go by betterhumanhood.com for show notes to this and other episodes. And you can check me out elsewhere, joshshear.com, and on the JKWD podcast at jkwdpodcast.com. We are starting to plan out 2020 here at Better Humanhood, and it's looking like it's going to be interesting, a lot different than this past year, so stay tuned for that. Go to kettleandfire.com, use code BetterHumanhood at checkout for 10% off your order. Catch you next time. Be who you will to be.
Thank you for listening. Get show notes and more at betterhumanhood.com. Leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And have yourself a wonderful day.